force, and it's like a low def, but it'll get it all on.
I guess it's Bob's I sat in front of me, I should move.
What about
Very good idea.
What about the X-rays computer?
Yeah, that's
depends what
true,
they want
right.
about them. I'm just talking about the astronomical side.
Okay, right,
Yeah,
folks,
that
we're going
up to date.
to make a start. I have to get the 9:41 train to Dundee, so I don't know, there's a lot to go through. Tonight,
Robert, shall we close that door just to
right.
keep that, mainly because that light's shining in my eyes from the hallway.
Dazzling you, is it?
No,
So
shaded through the windows.
I know.
I'm going to be talking tonight about commercial spaceflight. As the US is moving eventually to being able to put people back into space. Okay, now there's a lot of news this week. Russia has now announced a permanent postponement of the next flight to the International Space Station. And this will lead to a crisis in America, because they will no longer have access to the International Space Station. Now, I don't know, I'm trying to find out, is it some technical fault in the Soyuz spacecraft, or is Putin doing a wobbler over, like they were banned from the Olympics, there's worsening relations between Obama and the United States? Is this the trap that people like me and other people warned the Americans would get them into themselves? If Mr. Putin falls out with the Americans, you know, they can find themselves grounded. Hopefully it's just a technical issue on the spacecraft, and they're saying it's postponed indefinitely until they can fix it, but we don't know what it is. This morning I went to NASA Watch, but it's just full of stuff about the Chinese space program, which is the big news event this past week.
Well, I got two messages about
Right,
this afternoon.
Well, you might know more than me about
both
it.
of which said it was technical reasons.
Good,
but
right,
they wouldn't
right,
do
but
anything
they're
on
not
that.
right. So the technical reasons, no, there's maybe some fault or something that they need to check. Right. Now, this week, China has launched its second space station, Tiangong 2. We got over 2 hours live coverage on CCTV. Unfortunately, it happened when I was at my work, so I used the satellite receiver to get the pictures, and then I connected up to the Blu-ray recorder to record the pictures onto the hard drive. Unfortunately, I made the mistake again by going in at half an hour because I had no idea. So basically I missed the first half hour, but we started recording half an hour before the launch because the Chinese authorities this time gave us the launch time, which is a step forward. This Tiangong 2 is a lot more sophisticated than Tiangong 1, and the main difference with this space station is it can be refueled. And if you need to have space stations in space for long-term missions, they need to be refueled because the orbit decays. Tiangong 1, it was a simple demonstrator that couldn't do that. This is a temporary space station again. I think it's one of a series of 3.
6 or 7. I got a list this afternoon of
You've got a
about
list of
7
different
different future
but what's going to happen?
connected with
Yes,
Tiangong.
because in 2020 they're going to have a permanently orbiting space station,
Yeah.
and that will be built up there like the Soviet Mir space station. It will be built up by 4 or 5 launches, which are probably on that 7.
Yeah.
So what I know of is that there was 3 mini space stations that are smaller than the Soviet Salyuts of the 70s, early 70s, right? This one is a step forward. Another thing that's going to be happening is that they're going to be demonstrating setting up automated Shenzhou spaceships for cargo without astronauts. Something that the Soviet Union did since '71 progress that they use on ISS. So in space refueling. These are all steps that China needs to take for its long-term goal of a permanently orbiting space station. The rocket is a new, more powerful rocket. China is developing a Saturn V class vehicle to put astronauts on the moon, and we think that this will probably happen within the next 10 years. So this is again an intermediate stage none of the nonsense of the Americans, international, Russian thing, 29 flights into space. This is just one flight. People think, well, it's small. But do you really need a giant space station? Because the answer is no, you don't. And one of the things is that people tend to forget that since the 1970s, we have a miniaturization in technology like that little tiny camera there. If I was doing this talk at Airdrie Observatory in 1980, Ian would be standing with a Portapack VHS machine and a cathode ray tube colour camera. And I'd have to help him out to the car, you know, at the end of the night because it weighs a ton. Everything's getting smaller. The cosmonauts, or astronauts, or we call them taikonauts, are due to go up to Tiangong in October. And of course, knowing my bloody luck like the last time, this will happen when I'm down meeting the Scott Kelly brothers, you know, the twin astronauts at Pontefract that they'll do in October. Now, this was the launch, and it was during the week, I think it was, I can't think it was Wednesday, I can't remember, because it's a lot more powerful rocket now.
4 minutes past 10.
Yeah, well, it's 11 now time, yeah, it's about 4 minutes past 11 our time. It has got a number of pieces of equipment. One of the interesting things, it also has a small satellite that can be deployed that will give us TV coverage of the Shenzhou docking to the space station. The satellite will also hover in space nearby the space station, and it will watch for any threats like meteorite impacts or stuff. So these are some of the equipment that is going in. That's the satellite that I'm talking about. This is a computer simulation inside. This is what it looks like. It's a bit like a Salyut space stations that we had in the 70s. It's probably slightly smaller than Salyut, and it can take a crew of 3 astronauts. And what is interesting now is that China has announced that on this next flight, the crew will spend 30 days in space. On the last space station we had in 2011, the crew only spent about 14 days. And if you look at the American space program, it's like Skylab. You remember Skylab in the early 70s, where the Americans had 3 Apollo flights, and they extended the duration, you know. And again, this is something that Chinese people need to do if we want to move from this to a bigger space station. This space station is due to be aiming at 2020. The International Space Station will come to the end of its life in 2024. I think that's when the Russians have announced that they are definitely pulling out. You know. There's a lot of talk in Russia about they want their own space station in a different orbit. There is also a lot of talk in America about lunar space stations, and the Americans' long-term goal under Obama was supposed to be sending people to Mars, and that's what they're supposed to be, but there's no any money in that. Hillary incidentally made a speech last week where she was talking about that she would support continuation of space, you know, and that, you know, the long term would be Mars, and like that. But she didn't announce any money that she was going to put any money into it. So far from Trump, we've heard next to nothing about space. But the thing is that we may see that China will be the main Earth orbital space station, because the ISS will be past its cell by the time that this goes on. And the Americans, NASA, and Europe and Japan are more interested in a cislunar. I talked about that a couple of months ago. Cislunar space station, it's like at one of the L points. And that's seen as a stepping stone to manned missions to Mars, because the astronauts will be further away from Earth. You know, if there are problems, it has to be more self-sufficient, you know, and there's a radiation issue and all the rest of it. And I think that is with China. China is now openly talking about Mars missions as well. They are now talking about a Mars lander and stuff, you know. As previously, China didn't say a lot about that. So this is the rollout from the vehicle assembly building. That would be about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and they use like they copied NASA. You know, you can see they've been copied to VAB. It's not obviously, this one's not as big as the one that we saw in Florida. This is, they are building a separate space centre for moon flights at Hayman Island, where the VAB is a lot bigger than this. And like the NASA, they use a mobile platform. It's very interesting when we're talking about how SpaceX want to do things which is kind of a wee bit different, which is quite interesting as a different way we could do that with SpaceX. There we see it there. This is a simulation of what we will see next month. And I have actually a model kit of this, of the Tiangong space station. I haven't made it up yet. And that was just from the TV coverage. So I recorded over an hour and a half, and that's just a computer simulation of track flight out across from China out towards Japan. This is the docking system, which is very similar to the Apollo-Soyuz docking system. And I'm going to, when we're talking about commercial space flight, I'll be talking about the new docking system for the American commercial companies, which again is basically Apollo-Soyuz 1970s technology. This is space enthusiasts in China, just like ourselves, who have built a full-scale mock-up of the Tiangong 1, and I just put that in to show you what that looks like. And I'll show a short video in a minute, but to speed things up, I'll just go on to have a look at the Jupiter. The Americans have got the Juno spacecraft in orbit round Jupiter, and these are some of the pictures. NASA has released hardly any pictures. Normally this is a problem I have with the European Space Agency. They release hardly any pictures, and it gets up everybody's nose, and they're all complaining on the internet, why can't we get more? There's copyright reasons, researchers have got to do work before it will be released to the public. And the head of ESA told me at a conference at Cambridge University, we have different types of freedoms in Europe.
We've got to airbrush out the aliens.
Yeah. We seem to have more freedoms in the People's Republic of China or in Russia or the United States. The Americans, I could get next to nothing. I thought, I'll go on and get, you can see there's a red spot. I thought by this time we would have had stacks, but no, I mean, these pictures were obviously taken while the spacecraft was approaching.
Have you heard the music from Juno?
No, I haven't. No, you were talking about that. Yeah. There was a Sky at Night programme you might have seen. They did Chris Lintott was over for the, and I've seen him on the NASA TV on a live programme at about 2 o'clock when he was sitting in the audience, you know, and then of course there was a Sky Night programme. So these are some of the latest images of the planet Jupiter. And then what I'm going to do very quickly is I just want to show you a little video of the space station. It'll last a couple of minutes before we go on to talk about the commercial space.
Heavenly Palace, in other words, Starship.
It's Heavenly Palace that
Which is a
call
poor translation of the
and
Chinese.
Shenzhou means
Heavenly Star Palace, well, ship vessel.
Shenzhou means divine vessel. And the Chinese Space Agency's logo is the Star Trek logo. That's very similar to Star Trek. Right.
Star Trek's influence is far enough.
It is, yeah. Okay, I want to talk about commercial spaceflight.
Wuhan.
Right, so
Wuhan is where the Chinese are doing commercial spaceflight.
yeah, they're doing it as well, yeah. There was actually CCTV did have a bit about Chinese commercial spaceflight, but I tried to get a video, but I couldn't, there was nothing. Anyway, so I'm going to talk about the commercial spaceflight in America. I'm going to really concentrate more on the two types of president. Commercial spaceflight in the United States is not new, okay? NASA had worked with industry since the beginning in the 1950s. In Apollo, for example, the commercial tenders went out to commercial industry. General Electric provided their proposals for the Apollo spaceship. North American Rockwell put in proposals, and other companies did. And North American Rockwell got the contracts. And because the story about General Electric is that the Soviets pinched that and it became Soyuz. And the Chinese have now developed that further, and the General Electric Apollo basically Shenzhou. President Reagan took the first steps to privatization in space in the 1980s. The coming of the space shuttle. In the late 70s, it was seen that there would be more routine access to space. People would be able to put stuff up. Companies could, instead of just test pilots, ordinary people could go into space. Various companies had proposals, and President Reagan privatized the launch processing. So the BBC always got it completely wrong. They would tell you, we're now going over to Cape Canaveral, and they would show you pictures of Merritt Island, and then they would tell you that NASA was going to launch the space shuttle. In actual fact, it was a commercial company, not NASA, that was launching the United Space Alliance. President George W. Bush took this stage further when he decided to commercialise the cargo out to private industry so that private companies could send cargo. And President Obama has taken that stage further, where he wants commercial companies to take astronauts. And of course that's been quite very controversial. He cancelled the return to the moon. The money to develop the Constellation program then went out into developing. They didn't want to pick one. They picked, as we know, several. I'll not go on about it, but I've talked about it. You know, I would have did things slightly different. I've just said I would have just picked one company. I would have looked at all the companies, but they decided no. Maybe it's because like the shuttle disaster, and you've got one system and it goes down, you need something else. So it's not at all popular. It was never popular in the Congress. In many respects, we've had an 8-year fight to try to save the space program because President Obama wanted to shut down the exploration site completely, you know, and cancel Orion and the Ares rockets. So the Congress was simply not having that. And it's not a partisan, it's not the Democrats versus the Republicans, it's jointly the Democrats and the Republicans versus the White House. And as Obama goes out of office, and you wonder what's going to happen with President Trump or Hillary Clinton as the president, what I've learned from Obama is that Congress seems to be taking more power away in space decisions from the White House. Now, this chart here shows the money, the budget by the Obama administration request and what Congress actually appropriated. And when President Obama announced this, I can't remember the figure, all the experts were in agreement that that figure was too small. And I think you needed 15 billion, you know, it's not accurate, I'm just guesstimating. It was something like they reckoned you needed 15 billion to do it for the first flight in 2014. And Obama was only putting about half that money in. But it's been an ongoing battle. You can see there that in 2011 it was 500 because they only got 321. Why did they only get 321? And it's because the Congress was developing money into the space exploration to SLS and Orion. In 2012, they were falling behind, so Obama requested 850, and they only got 397, and then in 2013 it was 835.25, 82. They did a bit better in 2014. They wanted 821 and they got 696. 2015 it was 848 and they actually got 805. And that was last year. Congress, it's absolutely amazing, decided for once to fund NASA properly, you know, not just commercial space, but the whole lot. Problem that NASA also has is that they've got to pay the Russians transport costs. When Obama came into office, the ticket was $20 million. As Obama goes out of the office, that ticket is over $100 million, because my friends in Russia are learning capitalism very fast, and they're basically get the Americans under a latchet. And it's really bad, because Charlie Bolden, the administrator, what does he do? The Russians if the Russians are demanding more money, he's got no option, he's got to pay that money, and that means there's less money to go to the commercial companies to develop spaceships. And that is what's been holding it up, basically. Now, they had a competition, there were lots of different companies came up with ideas. We all know SpaceX seems to be the one that's most popular with people. The Boeing company, which was my preferred option, because Boeing had more experience and more money, and Boeing were basically using a stripped down version of the Apollo command module. There was Sierra Nevada, who were quite interested in their proposal, was a rip-off of a 1982 Soviet space shuttle, which was a rip-off of the $6 million man lifting body that NASA was trying to develop in the 60s. Unfortunately, it would land, it had the same tiles, but because it was an inline thing, it was a lot safer, it was a lot smaller, and NASA, unfortunately, they didn't get the contract. They're still in there, but they're now bidding for a unmanned cargo. However, the European Space Agency has shown a lot of interest in using the Dream Chaser, or what it's called, for astronauts. And then there is SpaceX, Elon Musk. And this is quite controversial. They've had a lot of money, but he's also developing motor cars. Was it the Tesla motor car? They've been blowing up recently. Jim McDade saying what's going on in SpaceX is that there's a whole lot of money that's just getting shoved around all Elon Musk's different companies. So it's a bit like football teams. I was watching a programme about, it was one of the Edinburgh teams, I think it was either Hearts or Hibs, an English guy bought the team, they got the football club, and he was diverting money away from Hibs or Hearts to a failing restaurant chain in Sussex or wherever it was. And that was bleeding the money. So there's a lot of controversies and issues about SpaceX. The Elon Musk reckons that he can do things a lot quicker. Excalibur, Almaz, I think they've died a death now. They were in Isle of Man and they had bought an actual Soviet space station, and but they've disappeared. And then there's the one I'm going to be talking about, Jeff Bezos, the guy that founded Amazon, who's extremely secretive. So NASA is then being given, and this is some of the money, to these companies. Now, originally, it was going to happen in 2014, but because of funding and other issues, it's not. So, as of August 2016, SpaceX Dragon V2, and I'll talk about that, has a scheduled in-flight abort test has slipped to July of next year. Following an unmanned test flight to the ISS in May 2017, and then following this, a manned test flight should launch in August 2017, but maybe delayed into 2018. As you know, that SpaceX have had a lot of spectacular explosions recently, so these dates are going to... However, Elon Musk was saying that he hopes to have the return to flight as early as November. You know, so if he does that, we still don't know what caused the SpaceX incident. As of August 2016, Boeing CST-100 is scheduled for an unmanned test flight in December of 2017. And it will be followed by a manned test flight in January 2018. And the first contracted crew delivery, known as USCV-1, is tentatively scheduled for late 2017. And in August 2016, the first commercial mission to the ISS is expected to occur and in 2019. And on the 28th of May 2015, NASA awarded Boeing the first contract to launch a crew to the ISS with the CST-100 under this initiative, and the launch is provisional on its certification. So that's where we're kind of moving towards eventually. So there's a lot of debate, how is this getting done? Are NASA astronauts reduced to passengers, or are they flying a spaceship that they are leasing? And it's a bit like that I would ask Mr. Souter to take me to Glasgow in his bus, or I would ask I think it's ridiculous, but I would have today for instance, I asked the Dutch state railway company Albelio, because Scotland is not allowed to run our own railways, which I think is outrageous. I would bring back British Rail. So I've asked Albelio to transport me down here. I could buy a car and learn to drive. I can't afford that, but if I had loads of money and I could do it that way. Or I could get the taxi down through Dundee.
Buy a Tesla.
I could get a taxi from Dundee to Glasgow, it'd be about 200 quid or something. So what NASA is actually doing is doing what Graham Dale's done. He's not bought an electric car, he's leased, and that's what Uncle Tommy did. And Uncle Tommy, when he always had, when he was alive, he always had new cars. When my dad drove around in old bangers, basically, you know, because Uncle Tommy had leased motors. So that is effectively what I believe. I know that is a situation with Boeing at the moment. This flag here was taken on the first space shuttle flight in April 1981, along with this patch here. It was taken back up, was it 2011, the last flight of the shuttle, and that's its mission patch. And it's on the ISS, and it was going to stay there until the next American space, flight to bring that back home. So it's a bit of competition who's going to be first, SpaceX or Boeing. NASA has selected a team of astronauts that will fly these commercial flights, and this is them undergoing training. Now, in the commercial spaceflight program, we are at the same stage that Apollo was in about 1965-66. That's where they're at the moment. It looks like nothing has been happening, but there's been 5 years in the making where they've had to go into develop the subsystems, systems, integrating spacecraft, the launch vehicles, and all the rest of it. So it might not look like commercial spaceflight, nothing seems to happen, but there's a lot happening behind the scenes. Now, one of the things that interested me in doing this talk, that really would be a separate talk, was that the guy at one of the guys at Space Historian at the Smithsonian has a blog that I subscribe to, and he had an interesting paper about commercial spaceflight in the 1990s, which is very interesting, because back in the 1990s there was a whole lot of commercial companies, so this isn't new, and unfortunately nothing real. There's only one company in the 1990s, or two companies, Space Adventures and the company that launched the Pegasus missile on a DC-10 airliner. But they were various spaceship, like the rotary helicopter design and the shuttle replacement during the Clinton administration that never happened. So there's now, 20 years later, commercial spaceflight is now happening. It's slow, but it's happening. And these are the people that NASA, and that lady there, I recognise her, she's flown quite a few shuttle missions as the others. And the next slide, that's Bob Jenkins, Sonny Williams, Eric Bowe, and Doug Hurley. So they are currently training to fly the Boeing CST-100, which is a stripped down Apollo with the crippled heat shield, basically. Because it's not going to the moon, you don't need a heavy heat shield. It's a bit like the current Soyuz spacecraft. It's the crippled version of the 60s Soyuz. It was designed to take cosmonauts to the moon, so it had a heavier heat shield. And this is the program mission patch. And what Boeing is doing is that they're building this spacecraft at Cape Canaveral In the 60s, Rockwell built Apollo in Downey in California, and then it had to be transported. So what this is doing is it's actually created jobs locally in Florida. I mean, when we went to Florida in 2013, we didn't have a car on that trip, and I didn't go into Titusville. It was just as well because I had all sorts of scare stories about how bad things were. Or this year was different. Graham Dale came with us and we could drive around. And when Graham met me at Orlando Airport, he told me, well, I had to drive around Titusville, and there's a big place where they're smashing up concrete blocks. It's absolutely gigantic, Robert. And I went there, I was just in tears. It's a shopping mall. It's like Dundee if the Wellgate Centre shop. There's charity shops that the Americans call thrift shops, and boarded up because when the shuttle program ended, you've got mass unemployment, you know, in the area. And but this is now creating it. It's now, and it's the same when Apollo ended. They went through a very bad period of unemployment, and then when the shuttle started, the jobs picked up. So the building, and what Boeing has done is that they've taken over one of the buildings in the space centre, you know, the orbiter processing facilities, the OPF. They had 3 of these hangars for the 3 shuttles. And what's happened to the Kennedy Space Centre now is that it's been turned into a commercial space centre. It's not just the government only, it's the government and commercial companies. There's a whole lot of stuff that NASA doesn't require anymore. The shuttle has ended. So these facilities can be leased out, and that's exactly what's happening. Boeing and SpaceX are taking huge amounts, and Jeff Bezos, I'll talk about later, is taking areas. So this is the Boeing where Boeing is building the CST-100, and they've now named it the Starliner. And that's just a simulation of assembling the heat shield, and then you've got the bottom of the heat shield, you've got the pressure module, goes into an instrument module, and then you've got an outer skin here. And this capsule will be reusable, it's semi-reusable, and it will land on land, it won't land in the water. And there's a construction, and another shot of the construction. And so when you've welded the 2 bits, that's what it looks like inside. And then they're using a place out in California for the Starliner operations. This is where they've been doing the parachute tests of the capsule. I think they've also tested the launch escape. I think this is the first mission badge for the first flight that's due within the next 2 years. So you have pad operations, and I'll talk about the new launch pad in a minute or two in the building. Now, Boeing will have its own mission control, not sure where that is. The pre-launch processing done at the Kennedy Space Centre. It has a baby service module because it's not going to the moon, it's only going to the ISS. And it can only stay in Earth orbit for under 24 hours, it must come back. However, if it's attached to the space station can charge batteries in it so that it can go. And then when they go away from the space station, then it lands. Now, Boeing said that if you're going to do this, we can't just use NASA because there's not enough flights that NASA is going to ask to make this economically justifiable. And we need to get other business. So the Boeing company signed an agreement with Eric Bigelow, who wants to have inflatable space hotels. What is more exciting to me is they've signed an agreement with the US commercial company Space Adventures. And Space Adventures are the people that have got an actual track record of sending space tourists to the ISS. We haven't had a lot of space tourists, you'll notice, recently. Sarah Brightman was going, she paid 35 million quid and then she crapped out of it. And they'd been quite a long time before Sarah, and the reason is because the American space program is grounded and the Americans are getting it taking these seats.
I thought it was a launch failure, was it not?
That's why she pulled out.
That was a Proton failure, it's not the Soyuz. If I was asked to go on the Soyuz 87 ballistic myself tomorrow, Greg, I'd go. It's the slightest. But she crapped out of it. So this will lead to more space tourists. So that's Boeing sees three incomes. They have built a new launch pad. When we were there in 2013, we started and we were there this year. It is almost finished. The only bit that's missing is the crew access arm that was actually added. And they're going to use the Atlas V. I think that's controversial at the moment because that rocket, and Andy might correct me if I've got this wrong, but that rocket uses Soviet moon rocket engines that are left over. And there's a Republican congressman trying to ban them from using Russian stuff, you know.
Can't have these commie rockets.
Well, it's to do with, not the commies, it's to do with Putin, you know.
The Atlas V has been delayed for a week, I believe, for some reason.
Right, well, this is the next flight now. So what's happened is that they are in the process of developing a new American rocket engine that would replace the Russian rocket engines. Because these Russian moon rocket engines will run out. They're not been in production for 40 years. So this is the construction of what we call the white room, the crew access room. And that was a couple of months ago. And there we go. And then they've got the lightning rods, you know, to protect they've been doing testing the capsule airbags, you know, to simulate the landing. Yeah, actually a hard landing there. The consoles and all that are pretty high tech compared with Apollo. It's all manual switches. It's completely, it'll be all computerized and stuff, you know. It'll be completely different. So the astronauts are doing a lot of training how to fly the Starliner. This is the service engine, the service module engine, that will be used for steering, because when it goes into space, then you have to adjust your orbit to approach either the International Space Station or the Bigelow Space Station, or maybe even the Chinese Space Station in the future. So the Atlas rocket is very reliable. It's got a long heritage. It takes us back to the early days of a space program with the Mercury program. John Glenn did the first orbital flight in 1962. So this is what Boeing are using. And there's the astronauts out on the launch pad. That would be about a month or two ago when that was taken. And this is the docking. What NASA has now went and they brought back the Apollo-Soyuz type docking system, which was using Apollo-Soyuz. And that will be the 1975 docking system will be the standard. All the commercial vehicles will be fitted. So SpaceX, Boeing, Blue Origin, all these different companies. If you get a contract, you will have to, part of the contract, your capsule or your spaceship will have to have this fitted. So it's completely separate from they did a spacewalk last year where they did all the wiring. And then the last spacewalk we had, unfortunately I missed it because I was working in the observatory that day, they did a spacewalk to actually fix the docking mechanism. So that has now been installed on the ISS. So there's a lot of work in building facilities. So this is Boeing. So I'm now going to talk about SpaceX. SpaceX, Elon Musk has taken out a lease on Launch Complex 39A. I think it is 39A and 39B. And this is the Apollo launch pad. This is where the people left this world to go to another world. It's quite historic, you know. The NASA had demolished 39B for the Constellation program. It's now going to be used for the Space Launch System. So it basically, there's nothing there, it's just a flat area of land and 4 lightning towers. And like Apollo, what happened is that the crawler will take out, and it's been completely renovated, new engines, new everything, will take the rocket and the launch tower out to the pad. That pad is also available for commercial companies who may have a big rocket, and when NASA is not using it, they can book the use of 39B. However, at 39A, Elon Musk has signed a 20-year lease, so it's only SpaceX can use that. And what you can see here, this is space shuttle facilities. 2013, myself and the Malone family spent hours out here. We got a VIP tour and we were wandering all over the thing, and the woman was shouting at me because I went too close and I wasn't wearing a safety helmet. That's getting kept because what NASA did was that, well, the Air Force developed an actual space shuttle launch pad in California, and it was never used. NASA had to make do with the old Apollo stuff cut down and all that, and they built this retractable, this is what we call the retractable service arm, and you can see there's this kind of white room here, which is the shuttle, the size of the cargo bay. So what payloads like the Hubble Space Telescope would be put inside a container. They were then taken out to the launch pad, and then the container was hoisted in here, and then the spaceship would come out from the VAB, and when the spaceship got to here, then they would open the cargo bay doors and they would put the pod inside and they would close the cargo bay doors. SpaceX don't need this, so this bit is going to be demolished. Elon Musk has built this assembly building here. Now, it looks massive when you see it online, but when you actually go there, I was actually quite surprised how small it is. And inside here, the Falcon 9 rocket can be processed here. And the main difference is that he's installed a railroad. That is the American word for railways, a railroad. Right? He's got a railroad that goes right up to the launch pad. So that, and there's a gripper mechanism, like a thing that, I've got a picture of that goes out, and we saw that was sitting at the launch pad. The launch pad they were using has been totally destroyed in the explosion. So we think that the next SpaceX launch will be from 39A. So the next one will be. Now, what surprised me and everybody actually is that we expected that the Dragon capsule would be getting the one that SpaceX would use to take astronauts up to the ISS. Elon Musk, as he does, he surprises everybody, has come out with a radical new design. It's a lot more complex than what Boeing's talking about. And this is what it looks like, and it will land at the Kennedy Space Center. Capsule actually lands on land, and it's reusable, and the rocket is also reusable. The first stage will come back, and they've been trying to do that, and they've now, after quite a lot of failures, have now got it right, and it seems to be working. And at one point, the Beazle, what we call him, the other guy, was suing Elon Musk. I thought it was absolutely hilarious. He went to court and he said, "You are a pinching." What's this company again, Andy? Beazle's company.
Blue Origin.
Blue Origins. He was suing Elon Musk. I thought this was hilarious because you are stealing Blue Origin's idea. And of course, in England, the British Interplanetary Society turned and said, "Wait a minute. Kenneth Gatlin gave a talk at the BIS in the 60s, and it's in, I've got the book, it's a famous book that he talks about this in the 60s. As I say, nothing's new. So they had to give, that was quietly dropped. It's a piece of bloody nonsense.
Blue Origin has just pinched Ariane Space's director from the States, and he's now working for them.
Right, so Elon Musk started with a barge out at sea. But now they are getting it to land on land at the Space Centre. So this will bring down the costs of space flight, SpaceX, right? That's what because it'll be more reusable than the shuttle.
Somebody downstairs.
Yeah. This is the administrator, Charlie Bolton. Because obviously he will go because if Hillary wins, she might keep him on, but if Trump wins, he'll probably select somebody else. Well, I want to get the job, and I'm hoping that Trump will get back the real expert, Griffin, who was the NASA administrator in the Bush administration, that was moving towards a proper space program to get people back to the moon and onto Mars. So Sometimes, as Dan Golden was the administrator when there was a change of administration, the incoming president actually kept him on because he was doing a good job. So I don't know what's going to happen to Charlie Bolden. Is he going to retire at this point, or will he stay on? But that gives you an idea the size of the SpaceX spaceship, the Elon Musk. Some people question this, that there's a lot of risk in this because he's making it a lot more difficult. It's a lot more difficult, but however, if it works, it will revolutionise spaceflight, you know, and I think that's... And here's another view of it. And that's a simulation of it on the launch pad. What it will look like. It reminds me a wee bit of the BIS moonship in the 1930s. It's a big gumdrop type thing. And that's the thing I was talking about. This, I think they've got a name for it. It's like I don't know, it's a gripper or they have a special name. So what happens is that the Falcon 9 rocket sits on this kind of platform, and it's a bit like the Russian space program and the Chinese. The Russians, Soyuz goes out on a railway. Soyuz goes out, you know, since Yuri Gagarin and time immemorial, the Soyuz goes out on a railway train to the launch pad. So the SpaceX is taking unlike the NASA is using. The NASA will be using vehicles cars that are over 50 years old. But as you know, if it's not broke, you don't need to fix it. Well, the crawler, what they're basically saying is that they've been totally renovated, to put new tracks on them, they've ripped out the 1960s engines, they put new engines inside the crawler, and the Chinese have basically copied the Americans, you know. It's interesting, the Chinese space program, they copied the Russians and the space ships, you know, but they copied the Americans in the way that you process. You know, it's quite easy for China because they can get the experience of the Americans, and that's the same, and the Soviets before them. And Elon Musk also has, a lot of stuff has been done, you know. And what is controversial about this is what I call corporate socialism, because the government, you know, I mean, I'm all for commercial spaceflight if commercial companies are paying for themselves, you know, these billionaires. And what's happening is that the government is paying these billionaires, you know, pocket money projects to these space things, you know, and they're getting a lot of help with doing this, you know. Some people see it, it's like the aeroplane in the early 20s in America, like the Mail and all that was the government, and then we get commercial aviation companies. So we are now we're at that stage of spaceflight, moving from the government to commercial companies, you know. And regardless whether it's Trump or Clinton in November, commercial space is still going to carry on. It's not. This is to say, and as somebody was saying earlier on, it's even happened in China, communist country. They have got a commercial space industry to start. So that in a lot of ways, what would excite me is commercial space actually going somewhere, like commercial companies go and take me to the moon and Mars. And that, of course, Elon Musk wants to do that. And that is a talk to Andy Hill. That's a talk for another night. So this is the mobile launch platform. This bit will be getting demolished. They'll keep this. And the big SpaceX, the heavy rocket that we keep hearing about, will be getting launched from this launch pad. Now, so far they've only got one customer, and that's the United States Air Force for that, who want SpaceX to launch a big spy satellite. So this is the sequence of the SpaceX vehicle, you know, and it goes up for a test flight, and it's a stabilised burn here. It goes to apogee, and then this bit's called the trunk. It can also take up cargo, jettisoned at that point, and then the capsule will re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. Parachutes come out and it lands on land. This is a drogue main chute, and that bit goes into the water. So I'm not sure if that bit can be reused. So that is a test flight, it's not your operational, obviously it's going to the International Space Station. This is the construction in SpaceX of the actual flight vehicle. This was a test that they did, was that earlier on this year, Andy, was that last year? I found I could get lots of stuff about Boeing, but I couldn't get SpaceX. It was more difficult to what they did not release so much info. And this is testing the landing system. It looks quite scary, but it works, you know. All these flares. There's a better view of it, a soft touch thing. That's the thing that scares me. There's no parachutes or anything. You're coming in with these rocket engines.
That's a very good picture, that.
Oh, do you like that picture?
Almost as good as rocketry from Mars.
And there it's there. So it's something of a sci-fi movie, but there we go, but that's the way that we're going. This is, I'm not sure if it's this Boeing, it's going back to Boeing, it's testing, or is it SpaceX testing with that? No, it's SpaceX again, it's testing it with the parachutes. So I mean, if I was doing a talk about Apollo in 1964 or 1965, I'd be showing you things. This is where we're at with this stuff, you know. Now the other one is very interesting. I remember back in 1982, there was a thing on News at 10 that the Soviets had been caught, you know, the Australian Navy caught them in the act, fishing a mini space shuttle out of the sea, just north of Australia. And I remember it caused a lot of excitement at Air Observatory in 1982, we were all talking about this. The amount of arguments I had with people in ASTRA who did not believe me that the Russians were developing a space shuttle, you know. There's huge arguments with Lunin and arguments with Bonson and all the rest of it, you know. And I knew damn well that the Soviets were copying the Rockwell shuttle, and they were going about it in lots of different ways. They got this, and this company here, Zoom Chaser, and it's actually a lady that owns this company. It's a woman, and I forget her name, she's in charge of this company. And they decided to develop this shuttle.
It
and
was a guy, but he died.
Did he die? Because it's a lady at the moment. So and it's like a mini shuttle. And you know, somebody said, well, why couldn't the Americans use the X-37, which is Obama's secret military space shuttle? Which you would think if they went down that route, we would be saying billions, and this would have probably happened a lot earlier, but no, they wanted to do it commercially. So a lot of money is then put into developing this. When the Americans have actually got a shuttle similar to it, it uses the same type of heat shield tiles. It's a lot safer because it's on what we call an inline system that the shuttle's on the top of the rocket, so there's no bits of ice falling off the tank or anything, you know. So unfortunately, the NASA they didn't get funded for that. They didn't get any money. However, they kept it going, but they now want to use this for unmanned flights to take cargo, you know, for the commercial cargo contracts. So NASA has actually awarded them so much funding to take that a wee bit forward. However, the European Space Agency has have a lot of interest in this. I have to stress here that the European Space Agency is not the European Union. It's completely separate from the EU. And I'm concerned about this. I used to think it would be a good idea for ESA to be taken under control of Brussels. The European Parliament could have put more money into it, and then ESA would get a bigger budget. And that's not what's going to happen. The militarisation of the European Defence Force, the European Star Wars system, the EU's wanting to take control of the ESA space programme, develop money into military funding. And I hope that does not happen. However, ESA wants to use this. It could take European astronauts up to the space station.
Well, they can't actually, though, because they've been trying, but they can't. Canada is a member of.
Yeah, well, they wanted. That's right.
Canada,
That's right. Yeah.
Not a member
in the article in Aviation Week and Space Technology, the Brussels was wanting Canada ejected from the European Space Agency, which I found offensive. Really, no. It was a security issue, it was the Canadians. Canada has been participating in the European space programme for over 30, almost 40 years, you know. And so I hope that that idea is not, if they want a military space programme, fine, find it another way, don't interfere with the civil space. Thank you very much. Commercial cargo is obviously that's ongoing, and this is the other company, there's another company that does this, SpaceX and Orbital, who have their own spaceship. And they, like SpaceX, have had a few explosions on the launch pad as well. But most of the time that these missions are quite successful. So these contracts are ongoing until 2024. And what's interesting about this is, what I was talking about earlier on, the next stage would be when, after the ISS, in the late 20s, we're talking about a mini space station lunar orbit. And Orbital Sciences have come up with using this spaceship as modules for a cislunar space station. So Orbital Sciences would see that they could, once the ISS ends, they've still got a play in maybe a lunar space station. And of course the SpaceX, there's the Dragon, which is the other main system under the commercial cargo, which was started by President Bush. Now, just to finish up with this is with the node, to remove the shuttle docking thing, which is obsolete now, and they put on the PMA-2, this thing here. We had a spacewalk, I think that was done back in July, if I get that right. These attaching these, I don't know if I've got one on, and that looks like then there would be another one on. And that is the area on the ISS where the commercial spacecraft would dock. Now, when I wanted to do this talk a fortnight ago, and I went away and I'm getting old and dotery and I didn't transfer the pictures over, since the last ASTRA meeting there's been a major announcement in by Blue Origins, a very secretive company. Jeff Bezos, if I'm pronouncing that, is the guy that founded Amazon, and he's a multi-billionaire obviously, and he's a kind of competitor to Elon Musk, and he's been developing a returnable, there's a thing called the New Shepard that you might have seen after the American astronaut Alan Shepard, and he's taken this. He wants to go to a two-stage rocket. You see the Delta Heavy, which is at the moment the most powerful rocket the Americans have got. It's a tiddler compared to this, obviously, you know. But we can see now that the New Glenn, the three-stage version of this spaceship rocket, is getting on to the size of a Saturn V. And this is an absolute cracker. The first stage will have 7 BE4 engines, which use liquefied natural gas and liquid oxygen. And each engine can burn 550,000 pounds of thrust at full throttle. And so that gives you a total capability of 3.85 million pounds of thrust at liftoff. The BE4 engine is a joint venture with Blue Origin and Boeing and Lockheed Martin. So we get serious, this is happening, these are serious, when you talk about Boeing and Lockheed Martin, these are real companies, you know. And so this is obviously going ahead. The second stage has it's vacuum optimized BE4 engine in here, and then there's an optional third stage which has hydrogen, a BE3 engine powered by using hydrogen at 110,000 pounds of thrust. And Blue Origins are taking over Launch Complex 36 at Cape Canaveral and Launch Complex 11, which when I was there in 1998 with Graeme and Les Wright, we visited that area of Cape Canaveral, and this was the old missile row in the 60s, where most of it's all demolished and rusting away. So Blue Origin is going to bring this area back to life, and this is what it looks like. It's it's I get a bit reminiscent again of the BIS moonship in the 1930s, and it's got this. And so there's a single. He's also developed for space tourism a single that was called the New Shepard. That was successfully tested recently. Single stage suborbital rocket with a 6-person capsule, so millionaires or rich people can go for joyrides into space, and you see something there. And that was the test earlier. I think that was earlier on this year. And that's where this comes back, like Space X, it lands, and then the capsule comes back separately. And this is the artist's concept of the vehicle assembly processing building that they're going to build at Cape Canaveral with these rockets, and will be built and processed on the site. And there, this is what when the launch complex, you can see it there. He's going to have 2 launch sites, one for the smaller New Shepard for joyrides for rich people going up into space, and then the big rocket here. And like Elon Musk, he's got long-term plans of space colonisation and all the exciting stuff in the future. And this big rocket would be, he sees that as the long-term future. So I hope you found tonight of interest. I thought it's about time we did a wee update in commercial space, because it doesn't look like it, but a lot is actually going on behind the scenes. And we are slowly getting there. Okay. So I have got time for questions. Any questions?
How's Scotland's commercial space flight?
Well, Scotland is actually doing quite well for that. Scotland is the fastest, I'm told that Scotland is the fastest growing area in the UK for space, because we've got in Dundee, Star Dundee, based at Dundee University. They last year signed, or the year before, a major contract with the Chinese Space Administration on the Moon programme. They'd done stuff with the European Space Agency, and of course in Glasgow you've got Clyde Space. Clyde Space are actually making microsatellites in Scotland. Previously it was only done down in England at Surrey Technology in the south of England. Prestwick Airport is now what's happened now is that the UK government, we went from a situation under Labour, which was pathetic. Gordon Brown blocked any space development whatsoever in Scotland. George Osborne had reversed that nonsense, and the government was then seeing that they were going to they looked at a whole lot of sites in the UK, and surprise, surprise, most of them were all in Scotland. There was one in Wales. There's one in Cornwall, there was one in the northwest of England, and several in England. And Prestwick and Machrihanish, as far as I'm concerned, was the front runner. And they're even talking Lookers, you know. Then there was Lossiemouth and all the rest of it. I did get approached by somebody who was doing stuff with the Virgin Galactic. They were wanting to use up north. Alex Salmond was prepared to do that, but Gordon Brown blocked it. So all that nonsense is now gone now. The Tory government's changed that. There might be a lot of bad things about the Tories, but one of the good things about them is space, you know. What the government has now decided to do, and this was not Theresa May, this was David Cameron, the government has now decided rather than the government announcing we're going to pay money into one, they're not going to do anything now. Well, they're just going to leave it to commercial industry, and that's good for Scotland, because it means that they can, all these sites throughout the UK can compete, and who's winning? Prestwick. And I did do a talk about this a couple of months ago, because one of the commercial companies, X-Core Links for space tourism, has actually at the Farnborough Air Show signed an agreement with Prestwick Airport. And these things will go ahead, and it's got nothing whatsoever to do with all this nonsense about Brexit. Brexit have no effect whatsoever on commercial space. In some ways, Brexit will make commercial space easier for the UK. And it would no effect if we get independence tomorrow. It would not stop this, you know. It would probably, an independent Scotland, we could probably, depending on how interested the government in Edinburgh was, I think that Scotland is doing very well in commercial space. You know, I think they're doing, you know, and you get people like Colin McInnes and all the rest of it, obviously, so.
We have one problem in the Scottish Government in Edinburgh, so far as I'm aware. There is presently nobody who's got scientific qualifications in Parliament, in the Scottish Parliament.
Well, that's a common problem.
Not in Parliament. There has to be. Have to be
Mathematician,
Parliament.
We've got
MSPs.
Patrick Harvey's got a scientific background.
Yeah.
The guy we had at the Gallien talk. No, it was Stuart. Was it Stuart Stevenson?
Struan Stevenson.
No, he's a Tory.
Right.
If you mind, he was a transport minister when they all got cut in the snow in the M8.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. Right. He's brilliant. I liked him. I forget his name. I know who you're talking about.
It was him. He's got a scientific background as well.
Right.
And
I think he did a maths degree, I think he said.
Yes. He's retired from the Scottish Government.
he's retired for the cabinet.
I do remember
What
when
you mean is there's nobody in the government, nobody in the Parliament.
Yeah.
Well, there's the same problem with Westminster. How many MPs in Westminster have got scientific? And it doesn't help you because Jimmy Carter was the first. I remember the big thing about Jimmy Carter and Margaret Thatcher, who was equally as useless as Jimmy Carter. Margaret Thatcher and Jimmy Carter both had scientific backgrounds, and they were both useless for space. You know.
Yeah, well, this is true.
When, for instance, Thatcher was shown the Giotto pictures, which was a tremendous achievement for British science, you know, and for Europe. What pretty colours, what a waste of money, basically. And Carter tried to have, like Obama has tried and failed, like Obama, to shut this human space. Carter wanted the shuttle programme shut down completely. And the Office of Management and Budget had went to President Ford and said, look, it's a waste of money, we want to cancel this space shuttle, you just go back to capsule. And President Ford, who was not really a supporter of human spaceflight, told the OMB better off. And so the OMB went to Jimmy Carter and he said, yeah, well, we'll just cancel, you know. And of course, there's a famous incident that we all know about the UFO at the White House. President Carter saw the planet Venus in the evening sky and got on the phone to the NASA administrator and said, I want you to set X amount of money on UFOs, you know. And the NASA administrator quite rightly told President Carter we could stuff his UFOs if you're not funding the space program. So having a science background in politicians sometimes isn't necessarily very, very good. I don't think George Osborne had any science background whatsoever.
He's not any economics either, so.
But he was running the orbit for space. He did on the thing about the UK was that the British Interplanetary Society and people like Andy and Duncan and myself have been banging on for years about there's so much money that space, if the UK invested in space, that we've lost out in. And George Osborne, to credit when he was due, listened. And they reckoned that we could go from 10 million to 30 million being brought into the UK economy within 5 years by only adding a small extra piece in government spending in space. And George Osborne's done that, and we're already, Greg's asked me about Scotland, because of that, we're actually seeing a lot of the benefit of that happening in Scotland.
Yeah, thankfully it's economic sense to invest in
Yes,
space.
of course it is.
I think the problem before was, you know, Britain controls any space programme, but what they've actually done, the Tories are basically went, it's laissez-faire basically, just run it yourselves. So the
Conservative government have done like what President Obama has done in America. they're making it easy. Because one of the problems in the Bush administration was that commercial companies were still strangled with red tape and government rules, meaning they couldn't do anything. And basically, George Osborne's thrown all that nonsense out the window, as has President Obama. And that means then that it's easier for companies, you know. It's not this nonsense of Gordon Brown, no, telling Branson, you're not going to be allowed. In the UK, under the Outer Space Act of 1986, it has to be regulated. It would have to be regulated in an independent Scotland, just the same as it is in the UK, as it is in the US or in Russia. You have to apply to the government for a licence. Otherwise, we end up like what you get in the James Bond movies, with some mad lunatic putting a space station up there with laser guns or whatever to wipe out things on the ground. So it has to be policed, so to speak.
You don't need laser guns, I have brick would do it.
So, but I think I mean, it's a shame because a big hero of mine is Harold Macmillan. Harold Macmillan actually was the only Prime Minister in my lifetime that did anything for Scotland, and he invested in space in a big way. And it was Harold Macmillan's government that forced the creation of the European Space Agency. And it was Labour and the Tories, Ted Heath, that threw it all away, in the 70s, and it put us back decades and damaged the European Space Agency. Okay.
Said he can't conduct either.
I've heard he's not much